Good morning. It's Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me. Um, First, I want to get into just kind of a little bit of an update as far as what's going on with Miss Carol out at Kenny Lake. Um, so, what I'll do is I'll pause here and play you guys the Blink security camera footage, and I'll be back in just a minute. And discuss that a little bit. So, thing of it is these disturbing events continue in certain places. Grant you not everywhere, but what do you do? And I mean, I wish I had answers for that. Poor Miss Carol, she's dealing with it. With the orbs. I mean, she's captured a bunch of different orb activity. And I just showcased a couple little clips there. However, these things continue for some people. Who knows why? It seems like the more vulnerable the situation, the wackier it gets. I mean, and let's be honest, who do you contact with that kind of information? What do you? I mean, there's no powers that be that you can go to and say, hey, I'm dealing with freaking orbs ripping around my driveway, but ain't no one gonna do anything. Nothing to be done. And the thing of it is last year, me and Squatchbait witnessed that with our own two eyes. It was way lighter out. It wasn't even fully dusk yet. It was still plenty of light, and this thing was there, and it moved across the driveway, shimmered, and then moved off into the trees, almost like it was trying to lure me away. Squatchbait was like, I think it's time to come in. I was like, yeah, no shit. Because what do you do with an orb like that? And what is it? I wish I knew, but just a little bit of an update there. Those disturbing events continue. Miss Carol has a dog now. Fortunately, her family has seen the evidence, and they don't view it the same way anymore. They always knew their mom wasn't lying. They just didn't know what to do because they didn't understand fully. And then they seen some things and heard some things, and well, thankfully they got a better understanding now, and she's not as alone in it. Because I mean, Kenny Lake near the Copper River is hundreds of miles from me. It's not as easy as just jumping in the ride and taking off to go and peek around, because me and Squatchbait have been there a few times, and yeah, I mean, it just is what it is, right? So anyway, I'm gonna be doing a full length update here in the near future as far as Kenny Lake is concerned. There's some other activity that happened this season on McCarthy Road. And tell you what, I'll just share that portion with you guys since we're talking about the Copper River area. McCarthy Road, it starts at Chitna there, and once you cross the bridge, it's 60 miles to McCarthy, and creepy place, but beautiful. Wrangell St. Elias, beautiful, just gorgeous scenery. Well, this guy, we'll name him Charles. Charles was with his wife. We'll just call her his wife. And this was earlier this season. It was at the end of June. Still land of the midnight sun. Same time frame as we recorded down Ski Lac Lake, if that'll give you an idea of the daylight, situation. So according to what Charles said, they backed into a spot off McCarthy Road. He said it was about 20-something miles after you cross the bridge at Chitna, give or take, roughly. He said the spot they pulled out on or backed into had a little bit of an overlook back behind it, right? And he had a camper truck, which is just this camper in the bed of the truck. It pops up and, you can camp in it. My buddy Isaac has one very similar. Anyway, so they get there, and his wife is all about setting up camp. She collected rocks from the road to make a small fire ring. There was one there, but it needed to be built up a little bit. And as they were doing that, they going towards not even, I guess it would be sunset, which was about 11:30, 11:45-ish. At sunset, and it's still light out, but it gets dark in the tree line, And so they start this fire, and he's listening to a weird sound coming from down the embankment from the backside of their truck. And he said it was a little bit of a distance away, but he heard this weird grunt sound and some tree limbs breaking, right? So he figured, oh crap, it's probably a bear going after a moose, or a moose, doing something. And so he typically didn't carry a gun on him. He had one but he usually left it inside, kind of like, but at least he had it, right? So he retrieves his gun, and it was just a 9mm. However, it was something, right? And he said he walked to the edge where he could see down a little bit, and the trees were kind of obscuring everything, but he saw movement in the trees, and it was like a reddish brown, and he thought nothing of it. Oh, okay, there's a bear over there, is what he chalked it up to. Forgive the background sound, Tank is stealing the other chair. So he said as he was looking at it, something seemed odd, like it struck him funny and different. Like, he's seen plenty of bears. I mean, this is Alaska, depending on where you go, you can see them cross the road or down in the river. And he said he watched it for a couple just brief moments and seen it move away, and it was kind of zigzagging through these black spruce and some other poplar and stuff, the aspen down in there. And he said the way it was weaving back and forth wasn't bear-like, but it's the only reference he had was a bear. So he informs his wife, hey, sweetheart, I think I seen a bear down there. Let's just be aware. Let's keep all our food, up and safe and what have you. So what they decided to do with their food situation is, since their camper was so high off the ground with the lid of the camper raised up, it's a good 10, 12 feet off the ground where their particular point was. So they figured, we'll take our cooler of food and put it right up on top there, instead of tying it from a tree and having that hassle, because his wife was dealing with some back injuries and she wasn't really couldn't really help him tie off ropes and stuff like that. She just couldn't sustain. So during the midst of all this, they're being bear wise and going through their little plan scenarios, like, if the bear comes, we'll do this, if this happens, you do that, this kind of stuff. They really loved the spot, so they didn't want to move, and they had just set everything up. I get it. I totally get it. You put in a lot of effort setting up camp. Taking down camp is whack, whack, boom, clean it up later. You can just basically truss it in there. But so they do all that, and they're having a discussion, and they're sitting on the rear end of these steps, they kind of fold out when they drop down for the camper. They drop down and then they kind of swing out, and it kind of makes like a quasi rounded kind of stairway, and they were both sitting on there looking in the direction where all the sound happened. Now the trees are dark and it's light outside, right? Which is very, and unless you experience it, it's really different. It's strange. So they're sitting there enjoying the moments, and as it was, and again, it doesn't get fully dark, but as it got a little darker, he said it was about 2 a.m. and it was about dusk-ish, you know what I mean? And he just kept getting a feeling like they're being watched. And his wife, thinking of this bear, couldn't rest at all. She, according to what was said to me, she, even with her back issue, she kept getting up and pacing around the truck. Like she would walk around the truck just feeling anxious. And she kept checking with Charles. Hey, you have your gun, you have it on you ready. And, you know, he stops her and was like, hey, I'm feeling watched, and I notice you're uncomfortable. Maybe we should call it a night and just go inside, and maybe we could, you know, play a DVD and, you know, get our minds off of stuff. So they agreed. You know, it sounded like a good idea. Let's not just sit here and dwell and stress out. So they get into the camper, and they were sitting on some of the lower bench parts, and, you know, across from the stove. And as they were sitting there, they were watching the DVD player up on the counter across the little space there. And as they're watching the movie, they were watching Die Hard. And, you know, they had seen it a billion times, but it was just one of their go-to movies, you know, kind of like comfort food type of deal. But anyway, so as they're watching it, the movie had barely started, and they had the volume up pretty good. And Charles said he kept feeling like the truck was shaking every so often. Like he said it was the weirdest thing. He was like, I've been in that truck before when we had the earthquake in 2018, and he said that it felt very similar, but it wasn't sustained. It was just a jiggle here, a jiggle there, right? And after a few moments of that, you know, his wife caught on what was happening. She mentioned, hey, are we having an earthquake? You know, should we be this near an edge in case it sloughs off? And they start that conversation, right? And he's like, well, I think we would know, you know. So they pause the movie. He goes out, and he's kind of standing there waiting to feel the ground shake, right? Now, you got to understand, the trees are dark, but it's light in the sky, okay? And he walks around to the front of the truck, and he's just kind of standing there, just not really looking for anything, but just waiting to feel the ground move, right? And as he's doing so, he feels the ground move again. And he's like, what the hell? It doesn't feel like an earthquake. It felt like impacts, you know, but there was no noise associated with it. It was just the shaking, right? And he, for the life of him, he couldn't figure it out. So he goes back, and he's like, hey, he tells his wife, hey, there's something really odd. I'm feeling the ground move, but it's not an earthquake. It feels like, you know, a concussive, like, impact on the ground without noise. She comes out and joins him. And he has his gun in his hand at this point. Let me make that clear. When he went out the door, he had the gun in his hand. Now, when I asked, you know, was it because you thought you saw the bear earlier, and that was exactly why. He didn't want to potentially go nose to nose with a bear with empty hands and a hungry bear, right? So, but that's why he had the gun. So he said when his wife came out and they were talking, they were just right up by the driver's side door of the pickup truck, right? Big Dodge. It was like a 2500. And as they're standing there talking, they're discussing, because they're periodically feeling the ground shake, and his wife is like, I don't like this, let's leave here. Charles agrees. He goes, okay, yeah, this is, something's going on here, we want no part of it, we'll continue on to McCarthy and just pull out there and sleep down there. And so, you know, this is wee hours of the morning, this is going on 3 a.m. They start taking stuff down. You know, his wife starts singing a song to be loud. The bear song, hey bear, bear, hey bear, bear, and she was just interweaving all this stuff into it, right? Just to prolong the song and be loud. So they're efficient at getting things packed up and put away. And as they're lowering the camper top, right, They get it down, and his wife's like, "Oh, our food. We need to get that cooler off the top." And Charles was like, "Oh yeah." He jumps up, climbs up, and reaches. There's no cooler. He's like, "Well, where'd it go? Where in the hell's the cooler?" So they start looking around. He grabs a flashlight because it's dark. Now this was one of those Coleman, I think 16 liter, not a very overly big one, but big enough for their needs. And it was blue and with the white top and stuff, right? And he said he's looking all over for this freaking cooler. He was like we would have known, we would have heard a bear brushing up against the freaking camper. We were right there. We were awake. We weren't sleeping. And they're trying to figure out where their cooler went. They gave a short look around and they weren't seeing anything, right? They're like, well, screw this. They didn't know. They didn't want to know. They just wanted to finish what they were doing. So they finished lowering it down. They jump in, and he remembered he had set out a little satchel with the first aid kit and some other stuff back just behind the truck. So he got out to go retrieve that before they left it. He said, as soon as he grabbed that little satchel, he heard the deepest, it shook him to his core. This growl reverberated through his body. His wife felt it in the truck, and he couldn't see where it was coming from, but it was right over the edge where it sloughs down behind where they were parked. And he said that slope was a pretty decent grade down, and this growl sounded like it was on top of him. He said he immediately jumped back. He had the satchel in his hand. He ran back to the truck, shut the door, and was fumbling around, got his 9mm, put it in his lap, started up the truck, and put it in gear, and they pull out. They had to go to the right to go to McCarthy, right? So as they pull out, in which they were backed in maybe 10 feet, something like that. He said when he pulls out, he turns on his headlights. They swept, making that turn. The light swept the trees across the way, and they seen this little brown thing. Yeah, he said he called it a thing because it was just brown and it was gone. It was like a flash like that. It was like, well, maybe that was the bear, right? Because it's the only thing that made sense at the time. And the growl he heard, he chalked up to a bear growl, being very nearby, right? People explain things away. Well, he paused as the light swept. He said he hit the brake and stopped and grabbed his flashlight and started beaming over that way to see if maybe the cooler was there. He didn't see the cooler. His wife grabs his arm because his focus is off to his left as they're halfway through this turn. His focus to the left, and all of a sudden his wife grabs his arm and yanks it, and she's making this weird gasping sound. He looks over at his wife and notices the direction she's looking out the window. He looks out that way, and there's this figure standing there. He said it looked pretty lanky, but it was silhouetted because of the lighting of the trees and everything, but it was obvious it was there. It looked pitch black, but the headlights illuminating it just enough you could see some of that reddish brown color. He said that they sat there in shock. He doesn't know exactly how long, but it really shook them at what they were seeing, right? He said it had to be over 10 foot tall. And he said the thing that stood out outside of this dark figure is the cooler was basically at this thing's feet. Now, they weren't going to retrieve it. What they did is they ended up punching it, flying down the road. His wife's freaking out. And he said the weird thing about when they were looking at it, it just stood stoic. It was just standing there. And I was like, well, playing devil's advocate, I asked Charles, I was like, are you sure it was a figure? He goes, yeah, it moved once. When I initially saw it, my wife had already seen it. It kind of moved a little bit, getting a better look at us. And he was 100% certain of what he was seeing, right? He couldn't make out facial features or skin color or anything like that because it was just too dark. When they took off down the road, he said they got a couple miles down the road when his wife started breaking down crying and was like, what? Then they start discussing it. And he said that his wife swore off camping that day because she couldn't take the stress of it. And I totally understand, you know, especially when you're not aware of things in the woods. That's the main reason for this channel, is make people aware. You know, I don't care what you freaking believe. It's irrelevant. So, you know, they had the discussion. She doesn't want to go to McCarthy anymore. She wants to get the hell out of there, but not until daylight, because they got to go past the area they were just at to get back out of there. Oh, they're going down the road, and it is painfully obvious that his wife is really not having a good time of it. She's feeling nauseous. She's, you know, just shook up. So when they get down to McCarthy, they're there for maybe an hour, something like that. He took a cat nap, and then they drove on out. They looked for the cooler on the way out, couldn't find it. Yeah, you know, goodness, that whole area, even historically speaking, the Atna natives, they speak of these things killing people. Some hunters back in the 70s witnessed human bones near a group of these things, you know, out at Horse Creek. Just creepy stuff, creepy area. I want to thank Charles for sharing. I want to thank you guys for joining me, all the new subscribers. Appreciate you guys being here. And we'll catch you guys on the next one. Oh, Tank's on the lookout. Anyway, have a good one.